On last night's presidential debate. Wow, where to begin with this one? For the first time in the 2024 campaign, President Biden and former President Trump shared the stage in Atlanta. Now, Biden's voice was shaky, raspy. He was halting throughout. It was a very, very difficult watch for anyone. While Donald Trump repeatedly just made false claims, there was barely any truth to anything that came out of his mouth. Take a listen.
Yes, make the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Right now, everybody making under $170,000 pays 6% of their income, of their paycheck, every single time they get a paycheck.
They talk about a relatively small number of people that went to the Capitol, and in many cases were ushered in by the police.
A lot to unpack right now. Joining us to debrief the debate from last night is political strategist and federal and civil trial attorney Kelly Hyman. Hi, Kelly. Good to have you with us.
Good morning. Nice to see you, and hello to your wonderful viewers.
I mean, tough to make sense of what we saw last night. Give me your immediate reaction to this debate.
It was personal. In regards to first the statements that they made about each other. Biden called him saying you have the morals of an alley cat, and then Trump say you can't hit a ball 50 yards, talking about being a convicted felon, talking about Trump and paying hush money to a porn star, I mean, a president of the United States. So those are one of the key things that we do. But we also have to note that Biden did get a slow start, and it was noted that he wasn't feeling well, and you could see him coughing during the debate as well. And the fact that, as you said, Trump lies. He said he had the greatest economy that there ever was, or that all Democrats and Republicans and independents were supporting overturning Roe v. Wade. And another interesting point, that the moderators did interject. So if someone said something that wasn't correct, fact check in real time. They didn't do any of that. They would just ask the questions, and if someone didn't answer the question, then they would ask them again. Very hands-off, which is kind of interesting from a debate standpoint, because then sometimes you'll have some of them fact-checked in real time, so there was no accountability during the debate when false statements by Trump was made.
And you've got to give the former president credit for that, with no fact-checking and with two moderators who basically let him just speak unfettered, with not calling him out on any of the falsehoods. He was just able to just kind of rattle on things that didn't make sense, things that didn't happen, conversations that never happened, things that he did say that you've got videotape of that he said he didn't say, and it just kind of went on and on. The flip side of that, you can say all you want about the moderators, is President Biden. Now, there has been so much talk over the past months leading up to this election now of his age, and is he up to this task, and does he have the mental capacity to continue performing his duties. And having spent all week at Camp David with advisors preparing for this, it was hard to believe that a sitting president could come out so ill-prepared and sound as bad as he did without even being able to really articulate some of the finer points of what his administration has done or plans to. I mean, I think no matter what side of the aisle you are on, this was not a good night for the president in the remotest terms.
I don't think it was a good night for either of the parties, or for people to make a determination, because you have one side, no matter what political party that you're on, that, Biden had a slow start. He didn't feel well, but then you had making up lies about stuff that actually didn't happen and actually weren't the truth. So American people have to look to the policies of what the president wants to bring forward and what their vision is as well. And I think that's definitely very, key. It's important for people to get out and exercise their right to vote and realize what are the policies, what are they doing, what is the president doing for the American people, right? Are they getting up every day thinking about how that they can make life better for the American people, or are they talking about revenge and retribution and going against people and putting them in jail? And I think that's really important, of what kind of country that we want to be, what kind of where we want to go forward and where we've been. I think that's really important. But supposedly there's going to be another debate. We'll have to see, what happens with that, and time will tell, because no matter what you are in this country, we can get out and vote and voice our opinion either way.
The bar was set so low for this debate, especially in a lot of the post-debate coverage, where it didn't come down to issues. It was more about the performance. And again, this dates back to the Nixon days of debates of being kind of pasty and clammy on camera, and everyone thinking, disregarding what he said just based on appearance alone. The appearance last night for a swing voter or for somebody who's sitting on the fence saying, who do I go with, this president or the former president? What do you think they're thinking this morning based on what they saw last night?
Well, it's interesting. You bring up the fact about the Kennedy and Nixon debate, and when people saw it on TV, they believed that Kennedy won, but when they heard it on radio, they believe that Nixon won the debate as well. And so if you listen to what Biden talks about and the policies that he talks about, I think that's definitely important. But potentially, I think that's a wash for some of them. They say, actually it didn't make up my mind. I have one guy on one side saying it's the greatest economy and all this stuff, which I know are lies. And then I had someone else that, had a bad performance tonight. So, in a sense that it could be a wash, and hopefully there'll be another debate and other opportunities for people that haven't made a decision on who they want as, president and who they're going to vote for in 2024.
It's funny, last night listening to a number of Democratic pundits, whatnot, that immediately after the debate were saying throughout the course of the debate they were getting text messages and whatnot about, he's got to drop out. They've got to, hand the baton to someone else. Does a bad debate performance like this, do you think the Democratic Party today is saying to themselves, you know what, I don't know if we can do this for another 4 years? Trump is so vulnerable because there were so many attack points last night where President Biden could have jumped in and refuted and done a number of things to quell some of the attacks from Trump last night, but he didn't do it at all. So I know today a lot of people are saying, maybe the president's not up for the task.
Well, just because you have one bad performance, we have to remember that when Barack Obama was, having a debate, his first debate, he didn't do well.
Yeah.
And technically some would say, that he, bombed it. Sometimes we're human beings. We don't have good nights. It's one debate, and one debate doesn't change away his policy and what he's done for the American people and what he's, fought for the American people, and gets up every day and says that what I want to do for the American people and help them. And so it's wondering, where we want to go. What kind of president do we want? Is what issues are important to us? Is democracy important to us? Is freedom important to us?
Kelly, I'm sorry, but I hate to cut you off, but I got to wrap you up there. We're against a hard wall right now. Thank you again, Kelly Hyman, for talking with us. Greatly appreciate it. We will talk with you, I'm sure, sooner than later.